Camilla Sterling was used to being seen. She was seen in Forbes profiles, Wall Street Journal headlines, and luxury magazine spreads that waxed poetic about her impeccable style and unapologetic ambition. In every photograph, she stood with her. Spine impossibly straight, her chin lifted like a queen surveying her empire. But behind all that, in the silence of her penthouse apartment overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline, she was profoundly, irreparably alone. On the morning the invitation arrived, Camilla was barefoot in the kitchen, stirring oat milk into her coffee with slow, distracted movements. Her assistant, Morgan Hayes, entered like she always did, efficient, quiet, practically invisible, and her gray blazer and sensible flats. "This came for you," Morgan said, placing the thick cream-colored envelope on the counter. Camilla took it, glancing at the ornate gold seal. Another gala. Another excuse for the elite to pat themselves on the back for pretending to care. She sighed, tossing it onto the table with a bored flick of her fingers. Morgan didn't comment. She never did. She simply refilled Camilla's calendar, kept the wolves of chaos at bay, and remembered that Kama liked her espresso with exactly 1.5 sugars when she was having a bad day. That afternoon, Camilla stared at her own reflection for longer than usual. 35 flawless, successful, and so numb she could barely remember the last time she laughed without effort. That night, alone in her bed with the city buzzing below, she made a decision she didn't fully understand. "Morgan," she said the next morning, her voice calm but unreadable. "I'd like you to attend the gala with me." The pen in Morgan's hand stilled mid-note. She looked up, blinking behind her thick-rimmed glasses. "Me?" "Yes, you." Morgan's brows furrowed. "You mean as your assistant, right? To keep you on schedule." Camilla's lips curled into something between a smile and a challenge. "No, as my date." The silence that followed stretched out like a held breath. Morgan didn't say anything, just nodded slowly and wrote down the date. Camilla knew the buzz would start within hours. It always did. Her inner circle of socialites and strategic friends would be scandalized. She could already hear them. "Your assistant? Are you serious? Couldn't find a model this time, darling. This is going to be deliciously awkward." That afternoon, Camilla received 3 text messages from women she hadn't seen in months, all passive-aggressively offering to accompany her to the gala in case plans changed. She didn't reply. She didn't care. But something flickered in her. Just that night, as she reviewed her calendar, Morgan's name written in tidy, looping script next to the gala. A kind of flutter, anticipation, fear. The night of the gala arrived like a storm. Thunder in her chest, lightning in her blood. Camilla sat alone in the back of the limousine, diamonds at her neck, a gown like liquid gold clinging to her skin. Her heart, usually calm even in the tensest boardrooms, pounded like she was walking into battle. And then the car door opened. Morgan stepped inside and everything stopped. Camilla couldn't speak, couldn't think. She barely recognized her. The emerald dress clung to her body like it had been poured on. Her glasses were gone, revealing eyes the color of warm mahogany, framed with soft makeup that enhanced rather than concealed. Her hair fell in delicate waves over her bare shoulders, but it wasn't just the transformation. It was the way Morgan looked at her. Nervous, vulnerable, beautiful. I know this isn't really me," Morgan began, fidgeting with the clutch in her lap. "But I thought since you invited me, I should try to look the part." Camilla leaned forward, her voice rough with something she couldn't quite name. "You look," she paused, breath-catching. "Absolutely stunning." Morgan blushed, her eyes darting away. "Thank you." Neither of them spoke as the car pulled away from the curb. The air between them was electric, alive with unspoken things. When they arrived at the gala, the room fell silent. Camilla could feel the stares, the subtle gasps, the way people whispered behind champagne flutes. She didn't look at them. She didn't care because all she could see was the way Morgan's fingers brushed against hers when they walked side by side. All she could feel was the warmth of her presence, so familiar and yet suddenly impossibly new. Camilla had been to hundreds of galas in her life. She'd walked the finest carpets, worn the rarest diamonds, sipped champagne that cost more than most people's rent. But she had never felt like this. Not even close. Morgan at her side was like seeing the city lights for the first time. Not just beautiful, transformative. As they moved through the crowd, Camila felt the eyes, the whispers, the heat of speculation brushing against her skin. Like static. And still she didn't look away from Morgan. She didn't want to. Morgan, for her part, looked like she might shatter at any moment. Her fingers curled tightly around her clutch, her cheeks still tinted pink, her smile small but brave. "You don't have to hold my arms so tight," Morgan whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the string quartet in the distance. Camila glanced down and realized she was in fact gripping her arm too tightly. She loosened her hold, laughing softly. "Sorry, I'm not used to feeling nervous." "You nervous?" Morgan arched a brow, amused. "You stare down billionaire investors like it's nothing." "Yes, well, billionaires are easier to manage than feelings." Morgan blinked, and for a moment her expression softened. "That's the most honest thing I've ever heard you say." Camila didn't reply. She just reached for 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter and handed one to Morgan, her fingers grazing hers in a way that lingered longer than it should have. The gala was in full swing. Now, lights glittered, laughter rang out, and music swelled through the crystal chandeliers above. Camila saw the usual suspects. Hedge fund giants, old money heiresses, fashion editors with sharp cheekbones and sharper tongues. A few of them approached with forced smiles and thinly veiled curiosity. Camila darling cut Serafina Wells, wrapped in couture and cattiness. "We were also surprised to see you tonight accompanied." Her eyes slid toward Morgan, dismissive and assessing. Camila smiled with surgical precision. "Yes, I'm full of surprises." "And who is this lovely assistant?" Serafina asked sweetly. Morgan opened her mouth, but Camila beat her to it. "This is Morgan Hayes. She's with me." The weight of those words hung in the air. With me, not just beside me. With me? Morgan's eyes flicked toward Kama. Surprise and something else. Something. Warm swimming behind her lashes? "How charming," Serafina said before drifting off like perfume, leaving behind a faint trace of condescension. They moved on, past clusters of onlookers who still weren't sure what to make of the woman on Kama Sterling's arm. Camila was known for power, poise, and perfection, not for bringing someone real to an event like this. And Morgan was real, almost painfully so. "Do you regret inviting me yet?" Morgan asked as they reached the quieter edge of the ballroom. "Never," Camila said without hesitation. "They're just not used to someone who doesn't care about impressing them." "I'm not sure that's true." "I've never been so aware of myself in a room." Camila tilted her head. "Is that a bad thing?" Morgan smiled. "No, I think I just feel seen, and it's terrifying." Camila's throat tightened. She understood that feeling better than anyone. Being seen, truly seen, was something she spent most of her life avoiding. With Morgan, it wasn't just the dress or the hair or the makeup. It was her presence. It was the fact that Morgan saw Camila even when she wasn't trying to be seen, especially then. "Dance with me?" Camila said suddenly. Morgan blinked. "Here now. Why not?" "Because I don't know how to waltz." Camila smirked. "Then I'll lead." She offered her hand, and for a moment, Morgan just looked at it. Looked at her like she wasn't sure this was really happening. Then slowly, she placed her hand in Camila's and let herself be guided to the center of the room. The orchestra's tempo shifted as they stepped into rhythm. Camila held her close, one hand at her waist, the other clasped with hers, moving in. Slow, sweeping motions. Morgan was tense at first, uncertain, but she trusted. She let go, and when she looked up into Camila's eyes, something shifted between them, subtle but irrevocable. They weren't CEO and assistant anymore. They weren't employer and employee. They were 2 women dancing under the gaze of 100. People in a moment that belonged only to them. "You're surprisingly good at this," Morgan murmured. "I'm full of surprises." Kama whispered, echoing her own words from earlier. Their steps slowed. The music softened. Camila's hand slid slightly lower on Morgan's back, and Morgan's breath caught audibly. I don't usually do this, she said, her voice trembling. Neither do I, Kama answered. And they both knew they weren't just talking about dancing anymore. Camila didn't want the music to end. She didn't want to let go of Morgan, whose warmth had become the only real thing in a room built on performance. She could feel the quickening of Morgan's breath against her shoulder, the tentative way her fingers curled tighter around Camila's as if trying to convince herself this wasn't a dream. When the final note faded and applause rose around them, neither of them moved. They simply stood there, still holding each other, suspended in a moment they hadn't planned. But neither wanted to break. Eventually, Camila leaned in just enough for Morgan to hear her whisper, "Let's get some air." Morgan nodded, and together they slipped away from the crowd, ignoring the curious glances and subtle whispers that followed them like perfume. They stepped out onto a private terrace bathed in city lights. The cool night air kissed their skin, and for a long, silent moment, they simply stood there, two women overlooking a world that expected them to be something else. I didn't know you could dance like that, Morgan said softly, her arms still tingling. I didn't know I could feel like that, Camila replied, more to herself than to Morgan. Morgan turned to look at her. What are we doing? The question hung between them like fog. Camila didn't look away. Something I never let myself do. Feel? Morgan asked. Camila nodded. Want? Morgan exhaled slowly, her breath visible in the cold. Air, this complicates everything, right? I know, Camila said, but I don't care. You say that now, but what about tomorrow when we're not in a gown and tuxedo? When I'm back in flats and scheduling your meetings? Camila took a step closer. I won't forget how I feel right now just because the clock strikes midnight. Morgan smiled, sad and sweet. And what if I do? That landed harder than Camila expected. Do you want to? Morgan didn't answer. Not immediately. Instead, she stepped forward and leaned against the railing, staring out at the city below. I've worked for you for 3 years. I know every brand of tea you hate. I know when you're lying in meetings. I know when your panic attacks are coming even before you do. And every time I watched you walk into a room composed and untouchable, I wondered if you even noticed I was there. Camila's voice was quiet. I did always. Morgan turned her head, her hair catching in the breeze. You have no idea how many nights. I told myself not to feel anything, that it wasn't appropriate, that it was just admiration, that it would go away. But it didn't, Camila said. Morgan shook her head. No, it got worse. You were kind, distant, but kind. And I kept hoping for some tiny crack in the armor, something that said, you saw me, not as an assistant, as me. Camila closed the space between them. Slowly, deliberately. I see you now. I think I always did. I was just too afraid to look for too long. Morgan's voice trembled. And now I'm terrified, Camila admitted. But I want to be terrified with you. Their eyes met, and for a second neither moved. The city roared around them, but in that moment it was silent. Camila lifted her hand and gently brushed a strand of hair behind Morgan's ear. Hey, if you're enjoying this story, go ahead and drop a like to help us grow even more. And let me know in the comments, on a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story so far? Your feedback makes all the difference. Her fingers lingered on her cheek, and Morgan leaned into touch like it was the first kind she'd felt in years. If you kiss me, Morgan whispered. Everything changes. I know, Camila said, and then she did. It wasn't soft. It wasn't hesitant. It was a kiss that tasted of years of restraint snapping all at once. Morgan responded with a sharp intake of breath, her hands gripping Kama's arms, as if to ground herself, to make sure this was real. The kiss deepened, slow and aching, full of every word neither had said for 3 years. When they finally pulled apart, foreheads touching, hearts racing, Morgan gave a shaky laugh. Well, that was definitely not in the employee handbook. Camila smiled, her lips still brushing Morgan's. Then I guess we'll have to rewrite it. Camila, Morgan began, but Camila stopped her with a look. We don't have to figure it all out tonight. I just needed you to know that this is what I feel. It's real. Morgan swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. Me too. They stayed like that. For a long time, the chaos of the gala forgotten, the world reduced to city lights and shared breath. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both knew it. This night had changed everything, and there was no going back. They didn't speak much. On the way home, the silence in the limousine wasn't awkward. It was heavy with everything unspoken. Everything already said through a look, a touch, a kiss that still pulsed on their lips. Camila sat with her hands clasped in her lap, her mind racing in a way it never did after a gala. Normally, she'd be replaying conversations, assessing alliances, gauging future deals. But tonight, her mind wasn't on business. It was on Morgan, on the way her body had fit perfectly against hers while they danced. On the quiet confession in her voice when she said, "Me too." On the impossible truth that something had shifted between them that neither could deny or undo. Morgan sat beside her, quieter than usual, her hands nervously smoothing the emerald fabric of her dress when their thighs brushed lightly. She didn't move away. Camila turned to her just as the city lights flickered through the tinted windows. "You okay?" she asked gently. Morgan gave her a faint smile. "I think I'm still processing that I kissed my boss." Camila tilted her head, a ghost of a grin on her lips. "You make it sound like a scandal, isn't it?" Morgan replied, her voice soft. Unsure, Camila reached over, her fingers finding Morgan's hand and curling around it with surprising tenderness. "It only is if we pretend it didn't mean anything." Morgan looked down at their joined hands, then up at Camila's face. "It meant everything," she admitted. The car pulled to a stop in front of Camila's building. Neither of them moved. The driver waited silently, sensing the tension. "Do you want to come up?" Camila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Morgan's eyes widened slightly. "I don't want you to feel obligated to Morgan." Camila cut her off gently. "I don't feel obligated. I feel like I've been waiting to cross this line for longer than I want to admit." A long pause followed. Then Morgan nodded. "Okay." The elevator ride was quiet, intimate. Camila stood close, but didn't touch her. Not until they reached the penthouse and the doors opened to reveal the soft, warm glow of her home. As they stepped inside, Camila slipped off her heels, the height gone, but none of her presence diminished. Morgan followed her and slowly, hesitating near the windows where the city stretched infinitely below. "I've been here dozens of times," Morgan said, her voice thoughtful. "But it's never felt like this." "That's because you've never been here as you," Kama said, approaching her. "Not as the assistant. Not as the one with the schedule and the reports. Just you." Morgan turned to her, her expression open and vulnerable. "And what about you? Who are you right now?" Camila didn't answer with words. Instead, she closed the space between them and kissed her again. Slower this time, not urgent like before, but deliberate, reverent. Morgan melted into her arms, her hands finding Kama's waist, gripping the silk of her gown as if afraid she might vanish. When they finally pulled apart, Morgan let out a shaky laugh. "Okay, this is definitely the best night of my life." Camila smiled. "Mine, too." They didn't rush. They didn't tumble into something thoughtless. Instead, they talked, truly talked, for hours on the couch, barefoot, sharing a bottle of wine and pieces of themselves. Camila told her about the insomnia, the pressure, the loneliness of being admired, but never truly known. Morgan told her about growing up always feeling invisible, always hiding the parts of herself that felt too much. They laughed, cried a little, held hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. And when the moment came when Morgan touched her cheek and Camila leaned in again, it wasn't impulsive. It was inevitable. The night unfolded slowly, beautifully, like something sacred, skin against skin, yes, but more than that, trust, permission, emotion. Camila whispered her name like a prayer, and Morgan answered with a kiss that spoke of years of quiet yearning. They didn't sleep much, and when dawn finally crept in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the room in gold and quiet, Camila lay beside Morgan, watching her breathe, feeling something new settle in her chest. Not just desire, not just relief, but hope. And it scared her more than anything, because now that she had this, the thought of losing it was unbearable. And yet, the only thing more terrifying than risk was regret. The sun had barely risen when Morgan stirred. She blinked slowly, the early morning light brushing across her bare shoulder like a gentle whisper. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she turned her head and saw Camila, still asleep, her face relaxed in a way Morgan had never seen before. Vulnerable, peaceful, human, something clenched in her chest, soft and aching. She let her gaze wander not just over Camila's features, but over the room that had always felt like a symbol of distance, glass, steel, minimalism. But now, with a quiet breath between them and the faint trace of last night's perfume on the sheets, it felt warmer, like a secret, like belonging. She didn't want to move, didn't want to break the spell. But the clock was ticking, even if the world outside hadn't caught up yet. When Camila finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Morgan watching her. A slow smile spread across her lips. "Good morning," she said, voice low and raspy. "Morning," Morgan whispered back, brushing a strand of hair from Camila's face. They kissed soft and slow, not like a beginning, but like a confirmation. "I could get used to this," Camila murmured. "Dangerous words," Morgan replied, though her smile betrayed her. They stayed like that for a while, wrapped in sheets and each other. The world suspended just a bit longer, but eventually reality tapped on the glass. Emails, meetings, deadlines, and the question neither wanted to voice out loud. What now? "I should go," Morgan said, sitting up. "I have actual work to do." Camila reached for her hand. "Stay just a little longer." Morgan hesitated, then nodded. 10 more minutes, 20? An hour? But the moment they stepped out of that bedroom, everything would shift again. By the time Morgan finally dressed, her gown draped carefully over her arm. Camila's oversized shirt borrowed temporarily. She stood at the door looking unsure for the first time since last night. "We didn't talk about what this means," she said. Camila stood across from her barefoot, arms crossed loosely, "because I'm afraid if we start defining it, we'll ruin it." "But we work together," Morgan said. "We've always had clear boundaries. Maybe it's time to draw new ones. You really think we can?" Camila walked closer, her voice softer. "I don't know, but I want to try. And not just for one night." Morgan looked at her for a long time. Then she nodded. "Okay, let's try." The elevator ride down was quiet, not like the night before, but full of something delicate. And when Morgan stepped out into the street with her heels in hand and hair still told from sleep, she felt different, exposed, seen, alive. But the day didn't wait. She went home, showered, changed into her usual work clothes, slacks, flats, crisp white blouse, and by 9:05 a.m., she was walking back into Sterling Tech headquarters, just another assistant in a sea of driven professionals. No one looked twice. No one suspected that just hours before she had been wrapped in the arms of the woman whose name was on the building. Camila arrived 20 minutes later, composed, immaculate, and distant. Not cold, but professional, the way. She always was, the way she had to be. Morgan didn't expect her to act differently. She didn't want that, but it still stung. As the morning wore on, Camila barely glanced her way. Meetings, calls, investors. Morgan felt the shift acutely. She kept replaying their night together in her mind, wondering if she'd imagined the softness, the vulnerability, the way Camila's hand had lingered on her skin. But at 1:17 p.m., when she stepped into Kama's office to deliver a file, their hands brushed just barely. Camila didn't look up, but she murmured, "Low and careful dinner, my place." "Ate." Morgan froze, then nodded once, leaving without a word. And though the rest of the day crawled by like honey, something warm pulsed in her chest. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't fear. It was possibility. That night, as she stood in front of Camila's door again, this time in jeans and a navy sweater, no makeup, her hair loose, she knocked once, heart pounding. The door opened and Camila stood there barefoot in leggings and a hoodie, her hair damp from a shower. "Hi," she said. Morgan smiled. "Hi." They didn't fall into each other's arms. They didn't kiss like a movie. Instead, they walked to the kitchen. Camila cooked badly, adorably, and Morgan chopped vegetables while they talked about everything and nothing. There were glances, lingering touches, laughter, comfort, something that felt like the beginning of a life. After dinner, they sat on the couch, legs touching. No expectations, no pressure, just a space where two women used to walls and silence could finally breathe. "I don't know how this is going to work," Camila said. "Me neither," Morgan admitted. Kama turned to her. "But I'd rather risk everything than go back to pretending you don't mean anything to me." Morgan's breath caught. And in that quiet, she realized something. She felt safe for the first time in a long time. And maybe that was the most dangerous, most beautiful part of all. They settled into something that wasn't quite routine and wasn't quite chaos. Over the following weeks, Camila and Morgan danced a delicate line between private intensity and public restraint. By day, everything looked the same. Camila in sharp suits and authority. Morgan with her tablet, glasses back on, hair up, eyes focused. But by night, the lines blurred. Sometimes it was a quiet dinner. Sometimes it was Camila showing up at Morgan's apartment unexpectedly with takeout and tired eyes. Sometimes it was just silence, curled up together on a couch, no words necessary. The rhythm was uncertain but intoxicating. Camila had never felt this steady, this close to something real. And the closer she let herself drift toward Morgan, the more exposed she felt. It wasn't about sex. It was about trust, about letting someone see the parts of her that boardrooms and headlines would devour. And Morgan was trying to breathe in a world where her heart had suddenly become fragile. She wasn't used to this, being chosen, being seen, not just for her competence, but for her soul. Every time Camila touched her hand under a dinner table or whispered her name like a secret, she felt her armor cracking in ways she didn't know how to stop. But reality inevitably has a way of pushing through beauty. And it came as it always does in the form of questions. "You've been distracted," said Dianela, Camila's head of strategy, during a Monday morning briefing. "You missed 2 board prep sessions last week." Camila waved her off, handled remotely. "We didn't lose momentum," Daniela hesitated. "There's also talk about you and someone on your staff, your assistant." Camila's entire body went still. "Is that a problem?" "It's a risk," Daniela said carefully. "Optics, boundaries, HR. If it were anyone else, they'd already be facing consequences." Camila leaned back in her chair, jaw tight. "I appreciate your concern, but what I do outside these walls is not subject to board approval." "You're not just anyone," Daniela reminded her. "You're the company's image. Your relationships reflect on all of us." Camila didn't respond, but something in her settled into cold steel. That afternoon, she asked Morgan to come into her office and close the door. Morgan walked in, tablet in hand, but paused when she saw Kama's face. "What's wrong?" Camila stood, walked around the desk, and reached for her hand. "We need to talk." Those 4 words always carried weight. Morgan tensed but nodded. "Okay, there's been speculation," Camila said. "Questions about us." Morgan swallowed. "I figured we've been visible." "I need to ask you something," Camila continued. "And I hate that I have to, but are you okay with this, with continuing this knowing it's going to get harder?" Morgan didn't hesitate. "Are you asking if I'm scared?" "Because yes, I am. I've worked too hard to be where I am, and I know how this looks to everyone else. But Camila asked, voice softer now. But I'm also tired of pretending I don't want something just because other people think I shouldn't. Camila exhaled slowly. Well, keep it quiet for now. No meetings behind closed doors. No late night drop-ins at the office. We protect what we have until we're strong enough to not care who sees. Morgan stepped closer. Camila, I protect this even. If I didn't work here, even if you weren't you. That cracked something inside her. Camila kissed her quick, firm, breathless, just enough to feel her, not enough to risk the door opening. That night, Camila stood alone in her penthouse, staring out at the skyline. She hadn't invited Morgan over. Part of her wanted to desperately, but part of her needed to think. She'd spent her life building a kingdom brick by brutal brick. She'd sacrificed softness for strategy, connection for control. And now here was Morgan. This woman who brought her coffee and wrote her jokes in calendar notes, who kissed like it meant something, who made Camila want to wake up before dawn just to see her smile. And she had to ask herself, what was she willing to risk? Because if she wasn't careful, she'd lose Morgan, not to scandal, not to whispers, but to her own silence. The next morning, she didn't wait for Morgan to knock. She opened her office door and found her standing there typing something into her tablet. Camila didn't say anything. She simply walked up, took Morgan's hand, and said, "Come with me." "Where?" Morgan asked. "Somewhere I don't have to pretend." She didn't let go of her hand. "Not this time." Morgan didn't ask questions as Camila led her through the lobby, past the polished marble floors and watchful eyes of Sterling Tech employees. Her hand remained in Camila's, steady and sure, even as uncertainty pulsed under her skin. They took the private elevator up to the executive rooftop, normally used for closed-door negotiations, brand photo ops, and the occasional press shoot. But today it was quiet. Wind tousled Morgan's hair, and the sky stretched endlessly above them, cold and clear. Camila let go of her hand only long enough to open the terrace doors. "I used to come here a lot when I first started the company," she said, walking to the edge. Before the board meetings, before the money, before people started looking at me like I was something they could sell or sabotage. Morgan stepped closer, her voice soft. "Why you stopped coming?" "Because the higher I climbed, the more I had to pretend I wasn't afraid of falling." Camila turned to face her, her eyes darker than usual stormy. "But I'm tired of pretending, and I'm tired of hiding you." Morgan's heart stuttered. "Camila, I don't need a public declaration." "I'm not asking you to. You didn't ask." "I know, but I wanna." She reached for Morgan's hands again. "You've been the only real thing in my life for a long time, and I'm not going to pretend anymore, not with you." Morgan swallowed hard. "So, what does this mean?" "It means we stop acting like we're temporary." Camila said, "It means we stop being afraid of being seen, even if it risks everything, especially if it does." For a long moment, they just stood there, wind in their hair, the city stretching beneath them, futures rising and falling like breath between words. Then Camila leaned in and kissed her. Not quickly, not cautiously, but like someone who had made a decision, a deliberate, dangerous, beautiful decision. When they broke apart, Morgan laughed half disbelief, half pure joy. "So what now?" "You kiss me in front of the whole skyline and then go back to work like nothing happened." Camila smirked, exactly like that. "You're impossible," Morgan said. Her cheeks flushed. "And you're the only one who tells me that to my face." They walked back into the building together, still holding hands, and something shifted in the air around them. People noticed. There were glances, whispers, a dropped coffee cup near reception. But Camila didn't flinch. She didn't release Morgan's hand until they were inside her office. And the door clicked shut. The rest of the week was a study in quiet. Rebellion, they didn't make any announcements. There was no press release, no internal memo, but Morgan started taking her coffee breaks in Camila's office. Their eyes lingered a little longer in meetings. Camila smiled more. Morgan walked a little taller. Then on Thursday, everything cracked. HR called Morgan in. The meeting was professional, clinical, filled with hollow phrases like maintaining, healthy boundaries, concern for perception, and potential ethical conflicts. Morgan sat still, spine straight, lips pressed together as they gently reminded her of policy and expectations. "Are you telling me I'm being fired?" she asked quietly. "No," said the director, "but we're suggesting a change in role. A shift to another department for optics." Morgan's heart sank. She saw the subtext. "You can stay, but not next to her, not with her." That night, she told Camila everything. They sat on Kama's couch. Dinner forgotten, wine untouched. "They want me to transfer out of your office," Morgan said. "They say it's not punishment, but it is." Kama didn't speak at first, her jaw clenched. "You're not being punished for loving me." "I didn't say love," Morgan said quietly. Camila looked at her, something unreadable in her expression. "But it's what this is, isn't it?" The silence that followed was thick and terrifying. Morgan looked down at her hands. "It feels like it, but I don't want to be the reason you lose control of your company." "You're not," Camila said, voice low. "They are." Morgan looked at her. "So, what do we do?" Camila stood slowly, paced to the window, then turned. "We stop letting them choose for us. We tell the board. On our terms." Morgan's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "I'm not ashamed of you," Camila said, crossing back to her. "And if they have a problem with the woman I'm seeing, they can take it up with the CEO." Morgan's chest tightened. "That could blow everything up." "Then let it," Camila whispered, her hand cupping Morgan's cheek. "I'd rather rebuild from ashes with you than keep living a lie." Morgan kissed her fiercely, desperately, and when they pulled apart, her voice trembled with truth. "Then let's burn it down." Camila had walked into countless boardrooms over the years, calm, sharp, untouchable. She had negotiated billion-dollar contracts, turned failing companies around, and silenced doubters with nothing more than a look. But as she stepped into the Sterling Tech boardroom with Morgan at her side, something felt different, not weaker, more real, more dangerous. The room quieted when they entered. 12 board members sat in stiff suits and careful expressions, eyes flicking from Camila to Morgan and back again. No one smiled. No one welcomed them. This wasn't a meeting. It was a reckoning. Camila gestured for Morgan to sit beside her. And Morgan did, folding her hands in her lap. Even though her fingers trembled, Camila didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table, tall and composed. But her voice when she spoke wasn't cold. It was honest. "Before anyone makes assumptions," she began, "I'm going to be clear. I'm in a relationship. It's personal, it's consensual, and it's not open for debate." The silence was suffocating. Then one of the senior board members, Gerard Lansing, cleared his throat. "Camila, we respect your privacy, but there are concerns. You're the face of this company. If word gets out, if Kama interrupted, it will get out. Let's not pretend otherwise." Another member spoke. "It's not about the relationship itself. It's about structure, power dynamics, internal precedent, and—" "I understand all of that," Camila said, "which is why Morgan has agreed to step away from her position as my assistant." Morgan's eyes flicked to her, surprised. Camila continued, "She transitioned into a new role in a different department at her own request, not under pressure. We've taken every measure to maintain ethical boundaries. But if this board expects me to apologize for who I love, I won't." Her voice didn't tremble once. Morgan, watching her, felt something bloom in her chest, fierce, full, unstoppable. She hadn't expected Kama to defend them like this. Not in front of the men and women who could challenge everything she'd built. But Camila wasn't defending her position. She was defending her heart. Gerard leaned back. "We'll need documentation. HR confirmation, a full statement of compliance." "You'll have it," Camila said. "But let's be honest about what this is. You don't care about compliance. You care about perception, so I'll make it simple. If this company falls apart because I dare to love someone real, then maybe it was built on the wrong foundation to begin with." The word struck the room like a match to dry paper. No one answered. No one could. Camila sat. The meeting ended 20 minutes later with tight nods and clipped goodbyes. Morgan didn't speak until they were back in the elevator. "You didn't have to say all that," she whispered. Camila turned to her. "Yes, I did." She reached for Morgan's hand and laced their fingers together. "I won't hide you." "I'm scared," Morgan admitted. "So am I," Camila said. "But that doesn't mean we don't move forward." Morgan stepped into her new role 3 days later, still in the same building, but now in strategic partnerships far from Camila's office. The transition was smooth, professional. On paper, it was perfect, but emotionally it felt like distance, necessary, painful, safe. They still saw each other. Lunches in quiet corners, text messages at odd hours, lingering glances in elevators. But the shift in dynamics was undeniable. Their worlds were no longer intertwined by routine, which meant that now everything between them had to be intentional. Every moment mattered. And maybe that was the point. One Friday night, after a long week, Camila showed up at Morgan's apartment unannounced. No limo, no driver, just her in jeans and a hoodie holding a bag of Thai. "Food?" Morgan blinked at her through the door. "Did you just walk here?" "I needed to think," Camila said. "And I didn't want to think alone." Morgan let her in, and soon they were curled up on the couch, takeout boxes open between them. Laughter slowly returning to the space between bites. "You know what I missed?" Morgan asked, her tone lighter now. "What?" "Your calendar invites the fake ones. Emergency meeting with espresso machine. Confidential lunch briefing. Tacos." Camila smiled. "I miss having an excuse to be around you all day." "You never needed an excuse," Morgan said softly. "I just didn't." "No, you wanted to." Camila reached for her hand. "I always wanted to. I just didn't know how to say it." They leaned in at the same time, kissing like it had been too long. Because it had. When they pulled back, Morgan whispered, "Tell me we're still okay." Camila rested her forehead against hers. "We're more than okay. We're still choosing this. Every day, even when it's hard." Morgan's eyes fluttered shut. "Then that's enough for me." And as the city buzzed around them, full of noise and judgment and endless expectations, they found something rare and steady in each other. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Fall settled over the city like a slow exhale. Cooler mornings, softer light, leaves gathering in corners of the sidewalk. For most people, it meant sweaters and warm drinks and earlier sunsets. For Camila, it meant the end of fiscal quarter meetings, final investor calls, and the looming shadow of the annual Sterling Tech Innovation Summit, an event she had built from scratch and one she loathed more each year. Not because of the work, because of the performance. The keynote speeches, the camera lenses, the endless expectation to be brilliant, cold, commanding. And now more than ever, that mask felt unbearable because every night she took it off in. Morgan's apartment and borrowed t-shirts, and tired laughter and whispered affection. And every morning she put it back on. Lately, the whiplash was starting to wear on her. Morgan had noticed. She didn't push. She never did, but her questions were quieter now. Her touches gentler. She offered space when Camila pulled away, but not distance, never distance. Camila had never known a love like that. Patient, waiting, without punishment. And it scared her because she didn't know how to deserve it. The summit was 10 days away when Camila found herself staring at the draft of her speech, cursor blinking endlessly in the middle of the paragraph. She couldn't finish. The words felt dead. Her thoughts wandered. And for the first time in weeks, she picked up her phone and texted Morgan not to meet her in secret or to vent or to escape, but just to be near her. "Can I come over?" "No business." "Just me," Morgan responded almost instantly. Doors open. It was late when Camille arrived. The apartment was dimly lit, a record playing low in the background. Morgan sat cross-legged on the floor in a faded college sweatshirt, surrounded by books and notebooks and the smell of cinnamon tea. Camila paused in the doorway, overwhelmed by how much this felt like home. Not a place, a person. "Hey, Morgan!" said softly, rising to her feet. Camila dropped her purse to the floor and wrapped her arms around her before speaking. I feel like I'm coming apart in pieces. Morgan held her tighter, then let me hold them for a while. No grand speeches, no dramatic declarations, just warmth, touch, presence. Camila buried her face in Morgan's neck and let herself be still. Later, they lay on the couch under a shared blanket, Kama's head resting on Morgan's chest. I don't think I can give another perfect speech, she murmured. Then give an honest one, Morgan replied. Do you know how dangerous that is? More than anyone. But I also know how powerful it is. Camila closed her eyes. If I tell the truth, it'll be about you. Then tell them, Morgan whispered. Not the gossip. Not the version they'll twist. Tell them who you are when you're not afraid. Camila didn't respond, but her hand found Morgan's under the blanket, and she held it like a lifeline. The following week passed in a blur. Preparations, edits, stress. Camila barely slept. But every night she ended up at Morgan's door. And every night Morgan didn't ask for explanations. She simply opened her arms. The night before the summit, Camila stayed silent through dinner, eyes distant. When Morgan leaned in to ask if she was okay, Camila only nodded. Then later, just before falling asleep, she whispered, If I fall tomorrow, I want you to be the first face I see when I look up. Morgan didn't say you won't fall. She simply replied, I'll be there. And she was sitting near the back of the auditorium, anonymous among the crowd, watching Kama step onto the stage beneath blinding lights. Camila stood in silence for a long moment. Cameras flashed, screens lit up, and then she said, For most of my career, I've been told I needed to. Be one thing, powerful, perfect, untouchable. I played that part. I wore it like armor, and it worked. But it also kept me isolated from everyone, from myself. A pause. The room held its breath. Recently, I've come to believe that innovation isn't just about what we build. It's about what we dismantle, the walls we tear down, the honesty we let in. And for the first time, I want to let you see the person behind the strategy. Her voice didn't shake. Not once. Because vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the birthplace of truth. And truth is what makes everything, technology, connection, love actually matter. She stepped back. The applause didn't come instantly. It came in waves, real earned. And in the very back, Morgan clapped until her palms arched, heart wide open. Tears in her eyes because Camila had stopped pretending. And in doing so, she had finally arrived. The fallout from Camila's speech was immediate, but not in the way she feared. There were no dramatic headlines, no board interventions, no angry investors demanding her resignation. What came instead was silence, and then slowly a shift. A few cautious compliments, quiet nods in the hallways, emails from junior staff thanking her for being honest, messages from industry leaders, not congratulating her on numbers or growth, but on courage. Camila wasn't used to being thanked for vulnerability. She didn't know what to do with it, but she knew how she felt when she stepped off that stage and found Morgan waiting for her in the hallway, arms already open. She didn't even make it halfway before Morgan pulled her in. You are incredible, she whispered against Kama's ear. I've never been prouder of you. Camila closed her eyes. I was terrified. I know. Morgan pulled back, cupping her face. That's what made it matter. That night, Camila didn't go home to the penthouse with the skyline view. She went to Morgan's place where the light was softer and the quiet was kind. They ordered Chinese food and sat on the floor in sweatpants. Camila's speech forgotten somewhere between laughter and shared noodles. You do realize, Morgan said, grinning at her, that you just outed yourself to about 3,000 people, including every major tech blog in the country. I know, Camila said, smirking. I'm expecting a headline tomorrow. Millionaire CEO confesses to having actual feelings. Morgan laughed. I'm serious. Are you ready for what's coming next? Camila leaned her head on Morgan's shoulder. If it includes you, I don't care what it looks like. The following week brought more change. Internally, her team adjusted. Quickly, HR finalized Morgan's transfer, and to Camila's surprise, a few employees came forward to express their gratitude, not judgment. "You made it okay to be human," one junior analyst said quietly before hurrying away. Camila found herself smiling more in meetings, interrupting less, listening harder. Not because of optics, because of Morgan, because the woman who used to stand behind her now stood beside her. And that shift had altered everything. Their relationship grew in the small spaces. Coffee in the morning, quiet dinners, texts during long days. They didn't post photos, didn't flaunt, but they didn't hide. When Camila's hand brushed Morgan's at an internal networking event and a few people noticed, no one flinched. Not even Kama. One night, a month after the summit, Kama invited Morgan back to her penthouse. Not for dinner or a meeting or a late-night drop-in, but for something else entirely. "Stay," she said softly. Morgan pulled her coat from the back of the chair. Morgan blinked. For the night? For more than that. Camila looked nervous. "Stay here. Move in." Morgan stared at her stunned. "Camila, I know it's fast. I know it's messy, but I want you here every day. Every morning I want to come home to you. I want to wake up beside you." Morgan stepped closer. "Are you sure?" Camila nodded. "You taught me how to be honest. Let me be honest now. I don't want a version of life that doesn't have you in it." Morgan didn't respond with words. She just kissed her deeply. Yes, they spent that night in each other's arms, quiet and warm. And when Camila woke up with sunlight spilling across the Ewing of Kröning, and when Camila woke up with sunlight spilling acrylic sunlight spilling across the bed and Morgan's hand curled against her chest, she felt something that had always escaped her. Peace, but happiness doesn't erase fear. It just gives you something worth protecting. And with that came a new question. Now that they had stopped hiding, now that they had started building something real, could they sustain it? Camila found herself thinking about the future for the first time. Not in terms of expansion or product launches, but in moments. Could Morgan see herself there? Could Kama keep growing without retreating into isolation? One Sunday afternoon, curled up on the couch with tea and a book open between them, Camila said quietly, "Do you ever think about where this goes?" Morgan looked up. "What do you mean us?" "In 5 years, 10, do you think we'll still be waking up together, laughing at stupid inside jokes, arguing about who drank the last of the oat milk?" Camila smiled. "Yeah, that." Morgan reached for her hand. "I don't know what the future looks like, but I know who I want in it." Camila looked at their joined hands. "That's enough for me." They sat there in the silence that only love could make comfortable. No crisis, no scandal, no drama. Just two women who had walked through fire and decided they'd rather build something from the ashes than keep pretending they didn't need more. For the first time, they weren't surviving. They were beginning. It started with toothbrushes. One in Camila's bathroom, then another in Morgan's travel bag. Then came the drawer, first filled with a spare sweater, a pair of flats, later with silk pajamas Camila had once teased her for, and a half-used bottle of rose-scented shampoo that slowly made its way into Camila's morning routine. Living together wasn't a dramatic shift. It was gentle, quiet, a gradual stitching of one life into another. Morgan made space without asking for it. Camila gave it without realizing she had. And in between the softness of domestic life, shared breakfasts, folding laundry while half-dancing to jazz, Camila learning how Morgan liked her tea, and trying failing to cook her favorite pasta, they discovered the parts of each other that didn't surface in meetings or midnight kisses. Camila snored a little when she was exhausted, but only when she slept on her right side. Morgan liked to hum while she read. Kama left lights on in every room, something Morgan teased her about relentlessly. But beneath all of it, beneath the bliss of their slow mornings and the quiet ache of missing each other during work hours, was a looming realization. Loving someone in theory was easy. Loving someone in practice day after day required something deeper. The first fight came over nothing, which is how most first fights begin. It was late. Camila had come home distracted, her phone buzzing with new updates about an acquisition deal. Morgan had planned dinner. She waited and waited. When Camila finally walked in, she was still on a call, barely glancing at the candles Morgan had. Lit the food, now cold on the table. Morgan didn't say anything right away, but the silence was loud. After the call ended, Camila rubbed her temples. Sorry, it was chaos today. You said you'd be home by 7, Morgan said quietly. It's 10. Camila blinked at her. I got pulled into something. You know how this works. I do, Morgan said. But you used to care when it made me feel invisible. That word hit like a punch. Camila's gaze hardened without meaning to. I don't need a guilt trip right now. I've had a day, Morgan. And I haven't. Morgan snapped. I waited here for 3 hours. I cooked. I set a table. I tried. You walked in and didn't even look at me. Camila exhaled sharply. So what? You want me to drop everything because we have plans? This is how I survive, Morgan. This is the life I built. And where do I fit into it? The question dropped like a stone in the room. Camila didn't answer. Morgan stared at her for a long moment. Then she quietly said, I'm going to my sister's tonight. Morgan, not because I'm angry, because I need space. And maybe you do too. She kissed Kama's cheek gently, picked up her bag, and left. The apartment felt cavernous without her. Camila stood in the middle of the living room, still in heels. Still in her blazer, still wrapped in the life she'd built. And suddenly, all of it felt meaningless without Morgan in it. She didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Her mind replayed every word, every silence. She kept checking the door, hoping Morgan would come back, even though she said she wouldn't. In the morning, the space next to her was still empty. Morgan didn't text, didn't call. Camila's instincts told her to let her breathe. But her heart said something else. That evening, she left work early, something she hadn't done in years. She took a cab across town, heart pounding the whole ride. And when she stood in front of the brownstone where Morgan's sister lived, she felt 15 again. Terrified and unsure and full of emotion she didn't know how to contain. She rang the bell. Morgan answered the door herself. Her eyes were tired. Her sweater oversized. She didn't speak, just looked at Kama waiting. Camila didn't give a speech. No monologue, just the truth. You're not a piece of my life, Morgan. You're the part that makes it matter. I forgot that last night. I'm sorry. Morgan's throat worked around emotion. It's hard sometimes loving someone whose world never slows down. I don't want a world that runs without you. Camila said, I can't go back to that. I won't. Morgan stared at her for a long moment. Then she opened the door wider. Camila stepped inside. They didn't talk much that night, just held each other close on the couch, neither needing to be anything. But present, love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up when it was hardest. And Camila had finally learned how. The weeks that followed were quieter, steadier, not perfect, not without tension, but real. After the night Camila showed up at Morgan's sister's door, something in their relationship shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once. It was subtler than that, like 2 tectonic plates slowly realigning beneath the surface. There were still long work days, still moments of frustration or miscommunication. But now when Camila came home late, she sent a message. When Morgan felt overwhelmed, she said so. And when they disagreed, they didn't retreat into silence. They leaned in even when it was hard. They were learning how to argue without breaking, how to love without conditions, how to stay. One Sunday morning, Morgan sat at the kitchen island reading a book while Kama cooked. The sight of Camila hair messy in sweatpants squinting at the French toast she was trying to flip made Morgan's chest ache in that soft, aching way she'd come to know. Camila glanced up and caught her staring. What? Nothing. Morgan said, smiling. You're just struggling with breakfast. Beautiful. Camila blinked, thrown for a moment. then laughed softly. You say that like it's easy. Morgan set the book down. It is. Loving you isn't always easy, but seeing you, that part's never hard. Camila went quiet, her hands still holding the spatula. My dear, sometimes I wonder if you see too much. You mean the things you try to hide? I mean everything, Camila said, finally turning back to the stove. I've spent years being the version of myself people expect. Strong and checkable. But you see the cracks. You hear the way my voice changes when I'm not okay. You know when I'm pretending. It's terrifying. Morgan walked over and wrapped her, arms around Camila's waist from behind. I see the cracks and I love them. Camila turned in her arms, their foreheads nearly touching. Why? Because they're real and because they're yours. Later that afternoon, they went for a walk in Central Park. It was cool enough for scarves, and Camila wore a beanie Morgan had knitted for her, a lopsided thing in navy blue that she claimed. Made her look relatable, even if she hated how it clashed with her coat. Morgan laughed every time she wore it, and Camila wore it often. They didn't hold hands at first. It was still new being out like this. But when a dog came barreling toward them and Morgan instinctively grabbed Camila's arm to dodge it, their fingers stayed linked. No one stared. No one cared, but to Camila it felt monumental. They sat on a bench near the lake sipping coffee. Camila glanced over at Morgan. Do you miss it? Miss what? Your old job. Being my assistant. Morgan laughed. Not even a little, really? Camila, I love you, but managing your schedule was like trying to play chess during an earthquake. Camila chuckled, eyes crinkling. You were amazing at it. I was, but I'm better at this. At what? Camila asked, though her voice softened like she already knew. Loving you? Camila went quiet again. Her hand reached for Morgan's. You really do, don't you? With everything I have. Camila exhaled like she'd been holding that breath for a long time. Sometimes I don't know what to do with it. This much love, this much peace. I've spent so long. Surviving that happiness feels suspicious. Morgan's expression didn't falter. Then let's stop surviving. And do what? Camila asked, almost afraid of the answer. Leave, Morgan whispered. That night, back at the apartment, Camila lit candles while Morgan chose a record. They moved through the space like something sacred lived in it now. Camila poured wine, Morgan cooked. They danced a little in the kitchen, slow and clumsy. They kissed between sentences, between songs. It was domestic, yes, but it was everything. Later, lying in bed, Morgan rested her head on Kama's chest. Have you ever thought about the future? Constantly. I mean our future. Camila's fingers traced lazy circles along Morgan's arm. I think about it all the time. And Morgan asked, I want one with you, not just in theory and practice. I want the fights, the makeups, the holidays, the bad days, and the really, really good ones. I want it messy. I want it real. Morgan lifted. Her head, eyes locked on Kama's. Then let's build it. Camila kissed her deep, slow, certain. That night, neither of them said the words, but both of them felt them fully, fiercely, irrevocably. It wasn't just love. It was home. Camila Sterling had never believed in forever. Not because she was cynical, but because permanence had always felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. People left. Circumstances changed. Walls were safer than hope. Until Morgan. Until the quiet, persistent love that didn't demand attention, but redefined everything it touched. It wasn't grand gestures that changed Camila's view of forever. It was Morgan's consistency, her laughter in the kitchen, her voice in the morning, her refusal to let Kama disappear into herself on the hard days. And now, 6 months after that unforgettable gala, Camila found herself doing something she never thought she'd do. She was planning a proposal. The thought alone made her heart thunder. Like she was back in the earliest days when every glance from Morgan sent a jolt through her chest. But this was different. This was rooted, earned. She wanted to do it right. Not flashy, not in front of cameras or dinner guests or boardrooms, Just the two of them. Somewhere quiet, somewhere meaningful, somewhere real. She chose the rooftop of their building, the same one where she'd first held Morgan's hand in public, where she'd first said, "I won't hide you." Now she wanted to say something even more permanent. Morgan didn't suspect a thing. Their days had settled into a rhythm. Mornings with coffee and teasing glances. Workdays apart but bridged by texts and inside jokes. Nights spent tangled together in soft blankets and softer conversation. Camila had never felt so present in her life. Never wanted anything more. The night she chose was warm for spring. A soft breeze moved through the trees lining the rooftop garden. She set up candles, simple ones. Nothing extravagant, just enough to make the space glow. She wore the sweater Morgan loved, the one that made her look dangerously human. She had the ring in her pocket and she waited. Morgan arrived 5 minutes. Late as always, her hair in a loose braid, cheeks flushed from rushing. "You said to meet you up here. I thought maybe you'd left a folder or something." Her voice trailed off as she looked around, taking in the soft lights, the open sky, the quiet. "Camila?" Camila turned, her hands already shaking. "Hi," Morgan's brows furrowed. "What is this?" "It's us," Camila said simply. "Or what I hope comes next." Morgan took a step forward. Suddenly still, Camila reached into her pocket and pulled out a small black box. Her voice caught then studied. "I didn't grow up believing in forever. I thought love was a distraction, something for other people. But then you walked into my life with your glasses and your sarcasm and your wild, stubborn heart, and you changed everything I thought I knew." Morgan's eyes brimmed instantly. "Camila, you show me what it means to be loved when I'm not perfect. You made me feel seen in ways I didn't think were possible, and I want to spend the rest of my life becoming someone who deserves you." She opened the box. The ring was delicate, white gold, simple, timeless. "Morgan Hayes, will you marry me?" For a moment, there was only wind. Then Morgan's hand flew to her mouth as tears spilled freely, her whole body trembling. "Yes," she breathed. "God, yes." Camila barely had time to smile before Morgan launched into her arms, knocking the box from her hand as they kissed, wild and laughing and crying all at once. The rooftop melted away. Time ceased. There was only them. When they finally pulled apart, Camila reached down, found the ring where it had landed in the grass, and slid it onto Morgan's finger with shaky hands. "Fits perfectly," she murmured. "Of course it does," Morgan whispered back. "So do we." They spent the rest of the night there, barefoot in the candlelight, wrapped around each other. The world below kept spinning. Deadlines would come. Pressure would return. But right now, they had carved out a moment that belonged only to them. That night, when they lay in bed, Morgan held up her hand, watching the ring catch the moonlight. "I still can't believe this is real." Camila kissed her shoulder. "It's the most real thing I've ever done." "So, what now?" Morgan asked. "We get married in a castle, run away to Italy. We get groceries tomorrow," Camila said with a grin. "You make me get up early on Sundays. I learn how to make your mom's lasagna. We argue about how to load the dishwasher. And we keep choosing each other." Every day, Morgan turned to her, tears in her eyes again. But smiling. "That sounds perfect." "It will be," Camila whispered, pulling her closer, "because you're in it." Engagement changed them, but not in the ways either of them had feared. There were no sudden shifts, no disappearing freedom, no loss of space. Instead, it was like adding a layer to something already strong. A quiet certainty that lingered in their mornings and the way Morgan rested her hand over commas without thinking, or how comma now introduced Morgan, not as my partner or my girlfriend, but simply as my fiancée. The word falling from her lips like it had always belonged there. The ring became a habit. Morgan twisted it absently while reading emails, caught herself smiling at it in meetings, once tapped it against her glass at dinner by accident, and immediately turned crimson when the whole table assumed she wanted to make a speech. Camila hadn't stopped teasing her about it since. They didn't rush the wedding. That had never been their style. Instead, they let the engagement settle around them like a second skin. The planning was slow and intentional. Conversations over wine, swatches of fabric laid across the couch, playlists curated late at night when neither of them could sleep. There were compromises. Morgan wanted something small, intimate. Camila, unsurprisingly, had imagined something more iconic. But when Morgan took her hand one night and said, "I don't want a show. I just want to hear your voice when I say yes," Camila melted. "Then that's what we'll do." They chose a vineyard just outside the city. Elegant, secluded, surrounded by soft hills and long golden afternoons. Not a castle, not Italy, but perfect in its simplicity. It would be a summer wedding, barefoot, water-filled, real. The news of their engagement didn't stay private long. Someone from the summit must have leaked it, or maybe a photo had slipped online. Either way, the press got wind of it, and for a few weeks they were everywhere. Speculation, headlines, interest pieces about the tech queen and her former assistant fiancé. Camila rolled her eyes. Morgan left. At least they got the fiancé part right, but it did stir up the past. Questions from investors. Quiet disapproval from a few board members. A passive-aggressive comment from a senior partner about keeping the company image focused on performance rather than personal matters. Camila handled it all with her usual grace. But behind closed doors, Morgan saw the toll. "Are you sure this isn't too much?" she asked one night as they sat on the floor with wedding catalogs scattered around them. "Because I'd marry you at City Hall tomorrow, you know that, right?" Camila looked up from the floor, her eyes tired but unwavering. "I know, but I don't want to hide our happiness just because other people are uncomfortable with it." Morgan nodded, then crawled across the floor and kissed her softly. "Okay, then let's keep building the life we want," loudly. Not everything was glamorous. There were arguments over catering menus. Camila hated the idea of a buffet. Morgan said plated dinners were pretentious. They disagreed over music, over flowers, over whether or not Camila's cousin should be invited after that disastrous Thanksgiving 5 years ago. But none of it broke them. If anything, it made them laugh eventually. One night, in the middle of a minor meltdown over the seating chart, Morgan looked up from the table exasperated and said, "Why do we even care who sits next to whom? We're the only people who matter in that room." Camila stared at her, then suddenly shoved everything off the table with a dramatic sweep. Morgan blinked. "Did you just will print a new one?" Camila said, already pulling her onto her lap. "But first, I need to remind you why you're marrying me. Because you're dramatic and impulsive and completely obsessed with me." "Exactly," Camila murmured against her mouth. Wedding planning might have been stressful, but the life around it was filled with laughter, affection, and a growing sense of permanence neither of them had ever known before. And amidst the chaos, they found moments that felt like stillness. One morning, Morgan woke to find Kama already up, sitting on the floor beside the bed with a notebook in her lap, scribbling something quickly. "What are you doing?" Morgan asked. "Groggy." Camila looked up startled. "Nothing. You're literally writing." "That's not nothing. It's..." Camila hesitated, then sighed. "I'm writing my vows." Morgan sat up, her heart stuttering. "Already?" "I've been writing them in pieces for weeks. Can I hear them?" "No," Camila said firmly, then softened. "But I'll give you one." Line. Morgan nodded, eyes shining. Camila smiled and read from the page. "Before you, I never knew that love could be a place to rest." Morgan didn't say anything at first. Then she reached for Camila's hand, placed it over her chest, and whispered, "It is for me, too." And in that quiet, still-lit morning, with the city stirring below them, and their future unfolding in messy, perfect little pieces, neither of them needed to say, "I love you." It was already written everywhere they looked. The day of the wedding arrived not with fireworks, but with golden light spilling across cream linen sheets. Camila woke to the sound of birds and Morgan's soft breathing beside her. For a long time, she didn't move. She just lay there, memorizing the outline of the woman who had somehow become her compass, her quiet, her forever. Morgan stirred, eyelids fluttering open, and smiled instantly. "Good morning, bride-to-be," she murmured, voice rough with sleep. Camila smiled. "I think I like the sound of that. You better. You're stuck with it." They didn't see each other again until the ceremony. Camila got ready in a small sunlit room overlooking the vineyard, surrounded by only 2 close friends. She wore no designer gown, just a sleek understated dress that moved with her and made her feel exactly like herself. No armor, no disguise, just Camila. Morgan dressed in a separate cottage nearby in a soft ivory jumpsuit that made her look like she belonged to sunlight itself. Her sister zipped her up, eyes misty, and whispered, "She really loves you, doesn't she?" Morgan smiled. "Yeah, and I really love her back." The ceremony began at golden hour. Guests gathered between rows of grapevines where the sky turned warm and the air buzzed with anticipation. No orchestra, no grand entrance. Just a soft instrumental version of one of the songs they used to dance to barefoot in the kitchen. Camila walked down the path alone, proud, calm. Her eyes locked on Morgan the moment she saw her, and everything else, chairs, people, time, faded. Morgan waited at the front, holding her breath, gripping a tiny bouquet of white ranunculus and eucalyptus that Camila had chosen herself because they reminded her of Morgan's quiet strength. When Camila reached her, Morgan whispered. "Hi," Camila replied. "I was hoping you'd show up." The officiant smiled gently, gave them a moment, then began. The ceremony was simple, just as they wanted. No readings, no long speeches, just their vows written in notebooks they hadn't shared until now. Morgan went first. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "When I met you, you were everything I wasn't. Sharp, composed, unreachable. I thought I was supposed to stay in the background, just keep things running, just watch. But then, little by little, you let me see you. And every part of you, your ambition, your fear, your heart, made me fall in love. Not all at once, not loudly, but fully. And now every part of me is yours." Camila took a breath, the paper shaking slightly in her hands. "Before you, I built walls because I thought that was how strength worked. But you taught me that love doesn't tear those walls down. It asks permission to come in. You never forced your way into my life. You waited. You were kind. You were patient, and you saw me in ways I didn't even see myself. You taught me that love isn't about being needed. It's about being chosen. And Morgan, I will choose you. In every room, in every lifetime, in every version of me, there were tears. There was laughter. There was a kiss that tasted like 3 years of becoming, of healing, of believing again. And when they walked back up the aisle, hand in hand, petals falling at their feet, the only sound that mattered was the shared breath between them, like everything had finally come home. The reception was soft and joyful, filled with people who mattered. There were speeches, but no cliches. Just love in every glance, every toast, every impromptu dance under string lights. Later, when most guests had gone and the sky was dark, Camila and Morgan wandered away from the crowd, barefoot on the dewy grass, hands linked. "We did it," Morgan whispered. "We really did." Camila stopped walking, turned to face her. "I used to think love was something I didn't deserve. That maybe I'd feel pieces of it here and there, but never the whole thing." "And now?" Morgan asked. Camila cuped her face. "Now I know love isn't something you earn. It's something you give. And you gave it to me long before I even knew how to ask for it." Morgan smiled, pressing their foreheads together. "I'll keep giving it every day." "Good," Camila said, "because I'm not done falling for you. Even now, especially now." They kissed slow and certain under the stars, and when they pulled apart, it wasn't an ending. It was the soft, steady beginning of everything they had waited a lifetime to feel. Love that wasn't perfect, but chosen, shared and real, finally, completely theirs. If you enjoyed this content and want to support the channel in a special way, try clicking the thanks button below. It's the one with the heart and $sign icon. With super thanks, you can make a direct contribution to the channel, which helps me keep creating awesome videos for you.